Kyle Mercer scratched the 3-day stubble on his chin as he squinted at what resembled a cross between an octopus and a pineapple. The merchant, a four-armed being with violet skin, noticed his interest and flashed a mouthful of iridescent teeth. A human appreciates quality rare delicacy, sweet like your earth honey but with kick of your wasabi. The merchant plucked the writhing food item from his display. Only 15 credits. 15. Kyle barked a laugh for something that looks like it might crawl back up my throat. 5. The merchant clutched his uppermost set of hands to his chest as if mortally wounded. 5. You insult my ancestors. 14. Kyle tapped his worn leather boot against the weathered marketplace floor. The Odyssey had docked for refueling 6 hours ago with another 42 before departure. His stomach growled louder than the ship's engines during takeoff. 8. And that's my final offer, Kyle said, already reaching for his credit pouch. The protein rations on my ship taste like recycled boot. CS10. The merchant thrust the squirming food forward. And I include sauce that makes even maintenance rations taste like Pleasure House Feast. Kyle sighed and thumbed 10 credits onto the merchant's biometric scanner. Deal, but if this thing lays eggs in my stomach, I'm coming back. The merchant cackled, wrapping the pulse in delicacy in a bioluminescent leaf. Human humor. Very good. No eggs, only satisfaction. Kyle tucked his purchase into his utility bag and continued through the bustling marketplace of Zalk. Kara around him. The trade hub teemed with lifeforms from a dozen systems, but predominantly the emerald-skinned Zari who controlled this sector. The translator implant behind his ear occasionally beeped as it processed the cacophony of alien languages. The Archeat Tal marvels of curved living metal and crystalline structures towered above the marketplace, casting prismatic patterns across the crowded thoroughfare. Kyle paused to appreciate a particularly impressive spire that seemed to defy gravity itself. First time on Zira. Kyle turned to find a weathered human trader with cargo pants covered in pockets and the sunburnt complexion of someone who'd seen too many alien suns. That obvious, huh? Kyle replied. You've got that. My eyes don't know where to land. Look, the trader pointed upward. That's the ancestral spire. Zari say it grew from the first seed their gods planted on this world. Grew most of their architecture is semi-organic, cultivated rather than built. The trader extended a callous hand. Dima Kowalski, independent cargo runner. Kyle Mercer, Odyssey mechanic. Kyle shook the offered hand. Any recommendations for someone with a mechanic's salary and a captain who expects everyone back on time? Dima gestured toward a narrow alley branching off the main thoroughfare. Down that way, third stall on the right. Old Vexa makes the best fire stew this side of the Cygnus arm. Tell him Dima sent you. Might knock a credit or two off. Much appreciated. Kyle nodded. What with all the he gestured towards several Zari females with intricate bands around their wrists, some softly pulsing with subdued light. Fade indic hairs. Dima replied with a knowing smile. Biotech marriage market. Those bands read genetic compatibility, psychological harmony, all that romantic garbage when one lights up near a compatible partner. Boom match made. Some say it's evolved biology. Others swear it's tech their ancestors embedded in their DNA. Sounds more efficient than Tinder. Kyle joked. Maybe. But I'd rather choose my own destiny than have some glowing bracelet do it for me. Dima checked his wrist display. Better get moving if I want to make the RAL transit. Good meeting you, Mercer. Likewise, Kyle replied, already scanning for the alley Dima had indicated. He navigated through the crowd, ducking under hovering cargo platforms and sidestepping a group of chittering insectoid tourists. The promised alley appeared between two undulating structures that resembled massive seashells. Kyle turned down the narrow passage, the sounds of the main market dampening as he ventured deeper. The promised stall was there, a humble setup with steam rising from bubbling pots that emitted aromas that made Kyle's mouth water instantly. He quickened his pace, nearly colliding with a tall, elegant figure rounding the corner from an adjacent passageway. Whoa, sorry. Kyle instinctively reached out to steady himself in the other person. His hand brushed against emerald skin, soft, almost velvety to the touch. Time seemed to slow as Kyle registered several details in rapid succession. Golden eyes widening in surprise, the elaborate cut of garments that screamed wealth and status, and the perfect proportions of The Zari female he'd nearly knocked over. Then came the sound, a high clear tone. Like crystal being struck between them. The slender biomechanical band on the Zeta woman's wrist erupted with golden light projecting intricate swirling patterns into the air. The woman's jaw lit. Elle dropped, her golden eyes fixed on the display, then darted to Kyle's face with an expression of absolute shock. Kyle stepped back, hands raised. I didn't mean to. The alley, previously a quiet backwater of the market, suddenly went silent. Then, as if a dam had broken, a wave of gasps and exclamations erupted from the gathering. Zari, by the ancestral stars, a human merchant whispered loudly. Impossible, the indicators never respond to Nanari. Another voice called out, wait, isn't that Risa Vexel? A third voice hushed but clearly audible in the growing crowd, the merchant's daughter, and an off-worlder scandal. Kyle felt dozens of eyes boring into him. The woman Risa apparently continued to stare at her glowing wrist device, which now projected complex shifting patterns between them like a holographic AR work. This cannot be happening, she finally uttered, her voice melodic even in shock. Look, I'm really sorry about whatever I triggered here, Kyle said, taking another cautious step back. I didn't mean to mess with your bracelet thing. A Zari male in elaborate robes pushed through the gathering crowd. Lady Vorel, your parents have been notified, they're on their way. His eyes narrowed at Kyle. Security has been called to deal with this situation. Hey now, Kyle protested, I literally just bumped into her. No need for security. Risa finally seemed to regain her composure, though her eyes kept darting between Kyle and her still glowing wrist. To Kel, that won't be necessary. This is unexpected but not a security matter. But my lady, the indicator I'm well aware of. What has happened? She interrupted, her voice gaining strength. More Zari arrived, forming a circle around Kyle and Risa. The golden patterns continued to dance between them, casting an ethereal glow across the growing audience. Kyle noticed several Zari filming the encounter with various devices. Great, he muttered, alien social media, just what I needed. A particularly ornate hovering vehicle descended at the alley's entrance. The crowd parted as two elegantly dressed Zari emerged, an older male with stern features and a female whose resemblance to Risa was unmistakable. Mother, father. Risa acknowledged, straightening her posture. The older female rushed forward, eyes fixed on the glowing display. Ancestral mercy. After all this time, her gaze shifted to Kyle, expression cycling through shock, confusion, and something unreadable. A human. I have a name, Kyle offered. Kyle Mercer, mechanic on the research vessel Odyssey. He gestured awkwardly at the light show still emanating from Rella's wrist. And I'm guessing this isn't supposed to happen. The older male stepped forward, his face a mask of diplomatic neutrality. I am Merchant Lord Vex Terrell. You stand before my daughter Arlisa Vex Terrell of the Fifth House. Nice to meet you all, Kyle said, attempting a respectful nod like I was telling security here. This was an accident. I bumped into your daughter. Her bracelet went haywire. And it's not a bracelet, interrupted a new voice. Azari was signed, scientific insignia pushed through the crowd, scanner in hand. It's a fate indicator, a complex biological system integrated into our physiology over millennia of evolution. The scientist aimed the scanner at the golden display. Fascinating, full activation pattern, unprecedented intensity readings. Can someone please explain what's happening in small words? Kyle asked. Patience wearing thin. Risa's mother stepped forward. The fate indicator identify perfect genetic and spiritual compatibility between potential mates. It activates only once in a lifetime with 99.9% accuracy. Okay, Kyle processed this information slowly. So it's like a biological dating app. The scientists looked offended. It's the sacred culmination of our evolutionary journey. The indicator analyzes thousands of compatibility factors instantaneously. Genetic resilience, neurological synchronicity, phenomenal alignment. I get it, Kyle interrupted. Super advanced matchmaking tech embedded in your bodies. But why did it activate for me? I'm not even Zari. The crowd murmured. This was clearly the question on everyone's mind. Unknown, the scientist admitted, still scanning. This is unprecedented. The indicators have never responded to Nanari in all our recorded history. Risa's father's expression darkened. This must be a malfunction. The Indicators don't malfunction, the scientist countered. That's like saying evolution malfunctions. Wait, Kyle said, a new realization dawning. You all keep talking about mates and compatibility. Are you saying this thing thinks we should be together? The crowd fell silent again. Risa's mother squared her shoulders. According to our most ancient traditions, you and my daughter are now considered bond matched. Kyle repeated. What your species might call married, the scientist clarified, not looking up from his scanner. Kyle felt his knees weaken. Married, I just wanted something to eat. The indicator has spoken, an elderly Zari declared from the edge of the crowd. The bond is recognized under the ancient accords. Merchant Lord Vex Terrell raised his hands. This requires deliberation by the family council. The human clearly had no intention. Intention is irrelevant to the indicator, the elderly Zari countered. The bond exists whether acknowledged or not. Kyle ran a hand through his short brown hair. Look, there's been a mistake. I'm leaving this planet in less than 2 days. I'm not marrying anyone. Breaking a confirmed bond is both taboo and physically painful for the Zari partner, the scientist said, finally looking up from his readings. Once formed, the biological systems become interdependent. Physically painful, Kyle echoed. Are you saying if I leave she gets hurt? Risa, who had been silently watching this exchange, finally stepped forward. The golden light from her indicator caught the elegant contours of her face as she moved closer to Kyle. Human, she whispered, her golden eyes reflecting the swirling patterns between them, a mixture of shock and growing curiosity in her gaze. You have no idea what you've just stumbled into. The crowd pressed closer, dozens of Zari witnesses to a moment that would upend Kyle's life completely. His comm unit beeped, probably the Odyssey, wondering why their mechanic hadn't returned. As Kyle stared into Ree's mesmerizing golden eyes, he realized with absolute certainty that his simple supply run had just become the most complicated situation of his life, and somewhere in his bag that pulsating alien fruit continued to squirm. Completely forgotten, the Vex Toral family transport pod shot through the crystalline tubes, networking Zalkara's upper city. Each banking turn pressing Kyle deeper into cushions that seemed to actively mold around his body. He gripped the armrests, knuckles white as the emerald cityscape blurred outside. First time in a gravitic accelerator? Arlisa asked from the seat beside him, her melodic voice tinged with amusement. Not exactly, just not used to ones without safety harnesses. Kyle managed, trying to maintain his dignity as the pod executed another stomach-flipping turn on Earth. Our lawyers would have a field day with this death trap. Lawyers, her golden eyes sparkled with curiosity. Professional argument specialists who make fortunes when people get hurt doing stupid things. Risa's lips curved into a smile that did strange things to Kyle's insides, and not just from the G-forces. How fascinatingly inefficient on Zalkara. We simply expect people not to be stupid. Merchant Lord Vectoral cleared his throat from the forward seat. We have arrived. The pod decelerated and docked with a seamless hiss at a private terminal embedded in what appeared to be a massive spiral of living metal in translucent crystal. As the doors whispered open, Kyle got his first look at the Vex Toral family compound and felt his jaw slacken. The structure sprawled across at least 5 acres, rising in elegant twist that caught the light of Zalkara's twin suns. Gardens cascaded from multiple levels, while what looked like personal transport pods zipped between various sections. It wasn't merely a house, it was a self-contained ecosystem of wealth and privilege. Holy, Kyle murmured, please refrain from human expletives while in our ancestral home. Merchant Lord Vex Toral said without turning around. The living walls sometimes absorb and repeat phrases they find interesting. Kyle shot a glance at Lisa, who simply raised an elegant eyebrow. He's not joking, she confirmed. Last trading season father hosted the Arcturian ambassador, who had rather colorful opinions about our taxation policies for weeks afterward. The East Y kept muttering obscenities about tariff rates whenever anyone walked by the family, accompanied by several attendants who had materialized from nowhere. Swept Kyle through a dizzying series of chambers. Each room seemed more extravagant than the last, living furniture that adjusted to optimal comfort settings as occupants approached. Ambient lighting that shifted to match mood patterns and holographic displays showing real-time updates on What appeared to be the family's trading empire. Kyle's comm unit buzzed insistently. He glanced at the display. 6 missed calls from the Odyssey. Captain Heron was going to have his ass for this. I need to contact my ship, Kyle said, halting the procession. My captain's probably ready to send a search party. Merchant Lord Vexel flicked his wrist dismissively. Already handled. Our diplomatic office contacted your vessel's command when the indicator activated. You what? The Zari Commerce Guild has already initiated standard protocols for unexpected bond formations involving offworlders. Risa's mother explained, her tone suggesting this happened every Tuesday. Your Captain Heron has been briefed on the situation. Kyle pinched the bridge of his nose. Look, I appreciate the efficiency, but this is all moving way too fast. I just wanted a snack, not a wife. The assembled Zari stared at him as if he suggested breathing was optional. The indicator does not recognize convenience, said an elderly Zari who had apparently joined their group. Her elaborate headrest marked her as someone of significant status. It recognizes destiny. Grandmother Vex Lara. Risa acknowledged with a respectful bow. I didn't expect you until tomorrow's council. The ancient Zari fixed Kyle with golden eyes that seemed to peer straight through him. When my only granddaughter's indicator activates for a human after remaining dormant for 7 cycles, I make adjustments to my schedule. She shuffled closer, the jewels in her ceremonial robes catching the light. Let me look at you, boy. Kyle stood awkwardly as the elderly Zari circled him, occasionally prodding him with a bony finger. Grandmother Risa protested, he's not livestock at auction. Adequate musculature, clear eyes, no obvious genetic deficiencies. The old woman completed her circuit and tapped her chin thoughtfully. The indicator sees something in this one that we do. Not fascinating or dangerous, muttered Merchant Lord Vex Terrell. A soft chime echoed through the chamber and a holographic display materialized in the center of the room. A female Zari with scientific insignia appeared, her expression intense. Esteemed Voral family, this is Dr. Zamora of the Scientific Council. We request immediate access to the human subject for preliminary compatibility analysis. Subject Kyle interjected, I have a name and I'm standing right here. Dr. Zimbora's gaze shifted to Kyle, her eyes widening slightly. Fascinating. The human SPE is present. Even better, we've prepared a full molecular in neural scan suite. Non-invasive, of course, Kyle echoed dryly, because that makes being treated like a lab rat so much more appealing. The scientist continued as if he hadn't spoken. This unprecedented cross-species activation could revolutionize our understanding of the indicator's evolutionary path. We must determine whether the Scientific Council will have its opportunity. Mayor Merchlord Vex Terrell interrupted, after family considerations have been addressed, this is still a private family matter. But good day, Dr. Merchant Lord Vex Torrell waved his hand and the hologram disappeared mid-protest. He turned to an attendant, informed the Ancestral Council that we will receive their delegation this evening and enhance security protocols. The news networks will be circling like scavengers. By now the attendant bowed and departed. Kyle felt the beginnings of a massive headache forming behind his eyes. Does anyone care what I want in all this? He asked the room at large. Grandmother Vex Lara cackled, the universe rarely consults us before rearranging our lives, boy, but since you ask, what do you want? Kyle opened his mouth then closed it. What did he want 24 hours ago? The answer would have been simple, finish his contract with the Odyssey, save enough credits for his own repair shop back on Mars colony. Maybe find someone to share it with eventually. Now he looked at Risa, really looked at her for the first time since the marketplace chaos. The ambient light caught the subtle sheen of her emerald skin, highlighting cheekbones that could cut glass, and the graceful curve of her neck. Her form-fitting attire, some kind of shimmering fabric that moved like liquid metal, accentuated curves that would make a Renaissance sculptor weep with joy. Beyond the exotic alien features, there was a presence about her, an intelligence in those golden eyes that hinted at depths he couldn't begin to fathom. He realized with a jolt that she was objectively the most beautiful woman, human or otherwise, he'd ever seen, and according to some ancient alien biological matchmaking system, she was supposedly his perfect match. There were worse problems to have. I want to understand what's happening, Kyle finally said, and I want someone to talk to my Captain, before she sends Marines to extract her missing mechanic, a reasonable request, Risa said, stepping forward. I'll escort Kyle to the communication suite while the family prepares for the ancestral delegation. Her tone made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. Her parents exchanged looks but nodded. The bond integration chamber will be prepared for this evening's ceremony. Her mother said the human should be properly attired. The human has a name, Kyle reminded them again. Indeed he does, Risa agreed, taking his arm. Come, Kyle Mercer, let's get you connected with your ship while my family processes their collective shock. Captain Amara. Haroon's holographic image flickered with barely contained fury. Mechanic Mercer, would you care to explain how a routine supply run resulted in an interplanetary diplomatic situation? Her dark eyes narrowed. Because I've got the Zari Commerce Minister insisting we extend our stay for ceremonial purposes, and Fleet Command breathing down my neck about fostering positive relations with the Zal Karen Trade Consortium. Kyle shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, I literally bumped into her in the market. Next thing I know her wrist thing lights up like a Christmas tree and everyone's treating me like I've either committed sacrilege or discovered alien Jesus. Haroon pinched the bridge of her nose, a gesture Kyle was starting to sympathize with deeply. The Zari take these bonds very seriously, Mercer. Breaking it could cause an interstellar incident. She leaned closer to the camera. Do you have any idea who the Vex Tau family is? Rich merchants, Kyle guessed. They control 30% of the antimatter refinement in this sector. The Odyssey's fuel cells, Vex Toral technology, the new warp stabilizer. Fleet Command just contracted Vex Toral patents. Haroon's expression hardened. So when their only daughter's biological marriage indicator activates for my ship's mechanic, people notice. Kyle glanced over his shoulder to where Risa waited at a discreet distance, pretending not to eavesdrop. What are my options here? Captain Haroon sighed. For now, play along, show respect for their customs. I've been informed that rushing or breaking these bonds can cause physical pain to the Zari partner. Fleet Command is sending a cultural attaché to help navigate the situation, but they won't arrive for at least 48 hours. She fixed him with a stern look. Until then, don't make things worse. I captain. The connection terminated, leaving Kyle staring at his reflection in the darkened screen. Your captain seems concerned, Risa observed, gliding forward with a grace that defied physics. That's her I'm contemplating spacing someone. Face. So yeah, concerned is one word for it. Kyle turned to face her. What happens now? Risa studied him for a moment. The golden light from her indicator had dimmed to a soft glow but remained active, pulsing gently at her wrist. Well, fate has dealt us an interesting hand, she said, settling onto a nearby living chair that immediately adjusted to her form. We might as well see what the ancestral stars had in mind. Kyle couldn't help but notice how the chair embraced her curves perfectly, highlighting the elegant length of her legs and the subtle shifting colors of her attire as she moved. Christ, focus, Mercer, that's remarkably chill for someone whose life just got hijacked by a biological mood ring, he remarked, claiming a chair opposite her. She laughed, a musical sound that sent an unexpected shiver down his spine. Would hysterics improve the situation? Fair point. Besides, she continued, her golden eyes sparkling with what could only be described as mischief. I've endured 7 cycles of my family parading eligible Zari males before me, each one more pompous than the last, and then you, she gestured at him, a human who doesn't know the difference between a status crest and a decorative headdress manages to trigger a full indicator response by simply bumping into me. Her smile widened. I find that rather refreshing. Kyle felt a strange warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the room's perfect temperature. So you're not horrified at being cosmically matched with an alien grease monkey? Are you horrified at being matched with me? She countered. One elegant eyebrow raised. Kyle's eyes involuntarily traced the perfect curve of her jaw, the shimmer of her emerald skin, the subtle iridescence of her eyes. I think I'll survive the hardship somehow, he deadpanned. She laughed again, leaning forward slightly. Then we understand each other. She gestured toward an attendant waiting silently by the door. Now we should prepare you for the traditions that await. The sharing of essences ceremony begins at dusk. That sounds intimate. Not in the way your expression suggests, she replied with a knowing smirk, though your mind jumping there does support the indicator compatibility assessment. Kyle felt heat Rising to his cheeks, what exactly does this ceremony involve? A ritual exchange of compatible molecular structures to initiate neurochemical synchronization. You're going to have to dumb that down for the human grease monkey. She rolled her eyes, though the gestures seemed more playful than exasperated. We drink special tea and meditate while our bodies attune to each other's biological signatures. Oh, that's less invasive than it sounded. The 3-day meditation retreat and mutual family tattoos come later, she added casually. Kyle choked on nothing. The what now? The next 18 hours were a blur of cultural whiplash. Kyle met more Zari dignitaries than he could count, each with complex name titles and elaborate social rituals he invariably butchered. News drones hovered constantly outside the compound, broadcasting updates to a planet suddenly fascinated by the human who had triggered a prestigious family's fate indicator. The Scientific Council, led by the increasingly persistent Dr. Zamora, eventually gained limited access to run non-invasive scans during the sharing of essence ceremony. The ritual itself was less awkward than Kyle had feared. He and Risa drank something that tasted like mint tea crossed with battery acid while sitting in a chamber filled with harmonic crystals. The indicator on her wrist pulsed in time with the crystal vibrations, sending occasional tingling sensations through Kyle's body that weren't entirely unpleasant. Throughout it all, Risa remained his anchor, explaining customs, deflecting the more intrusive questions from relatives, and occasionally making whispered comments that left him struggling not to laugh during solemn moments. Cousin Tex of Aaron's crest has been tilting further right each cycle, she murmured during one particularly tedious blessing. Family rumors says he sleeps upside down to compensate, but it's clearly not working. Kyle bit the inside of his cheek to maintain composure as the elderly Zarian question droned on about ancestral harmonies, his elaborate head crest indeed listing dangerously to one side. By the second day, Kyle had gained unexpected celebrity status for 3 distinct reasons. He was the first human to trigger a fate indicator. Raisa came from one of Zala's most influential families, and in species bonds were vanishingly rare. Scientists clamored for interviews, cultural anthropologists requested documentation rights, and most concerningly, several disappointed Zari suitors made thinly veiled threats about testing the humans' worthiness. Is that guy giving me the alien equivalent of the finger? Kyle asked Risa as they walked through the compound's central garden, a lush paradise of bioluminescent plants that seemed to react to their presence. Risa followed his gaze to a scowling Zari male watching them from a balcony. Keeler, former suitor, son of my family's main trading rival. She waved cheerfully at the glowering figure. The crest flare he's displaying roughly translates to I question your genetic viability and hope your reproductive organs shrivel. Charming, Kyle remarked. Should I be worried about Kalark all posture and privilege? She plucked a glowing blue flower from a nearby bush, twirling it between her fingers. Though I should warn you, he's likely to invoke challenge rights. Another ritual I don't know about, an ancient tradition allowing rejected suitors to prove their superior worthiness through trial. She shrugged as if discussing the weather rarely invoked in modern times, but Keltark is rather traditional. Great, so not only am I accidentally married to an alien, but now I have to fight for her honor too. Our honor, she corrected, stepping closer. The garden plants around them pulsed brighter in response to her proximity, or perhaps to their combined presence. And yes, essentially, Kyle Sci, any other bombshells you want to drop while we're alone? Risa's expression softened as she gazed up at him. The bioluminescent flora cast an ethereal glow across her features, highlighting the subtle patterns beneath her emerald skin. Up close he could see that her golden eyes had depth flexes of amber and bronze in iris patterns no human possessed. Just one, she said softly, placing her emerald fingers against his chest. The indicator on her wrist pulsed warm where it touched him. Let's test how compatible we really are. Kyle's heart hammered against his ribs, despite the absurdity of their situation, despite the cultural chasm between them, despite everything. He found himself utterly captivated by her, not just her EXO beauty but her sharp intelligence, her adaptability, the wit that cut through pretension like a laser scalpel. Your hands are at least softer than the engine parts I'm used to handling, he quipped, but didn't pull away. Instead, he found himself leaning closer. Drawn by something that transcended biology or accident, the moment shattered as an official-sounding chime echoed. Through the garden Risa stepped back, her expression shifting from intimate to resigned in an instant, perfect timing as always she muttered. A Zari attendant appeared, bowing deeply. Lady Vex Toro. Honored Bond, match your presence is requested in the Great Hall. Patron Kel Tar of House Zorks has invoked the ancient right of challenge. Kyle looked at Risa. I'm guessing this isn't something I can get out of with a strongly worded email. Not quite, she took his hand, her expression serious. For the first time since they'd met, Kalark has just declared formal opposition to our bond. The ancestral traditionalists will officiate a contest of worthiness, and if I lose this contest. The light from her indicator flickered momentarily, almost like a heartbeat faltering. Then our bond is declared invalid and I would be compelled to accept Kel Tark's suit. Instead, her fingers tightened around his, and the severing of an activated indicator bond is not pleasant for the Zari partner. Define not pleasant. Imagine your nervous system being slowly unraveled while your body forgets how to process oxygen. Her golden eyes met his. All playfulness gone. Some don't survive the dissolution. Kyle stared at her, the full weight of their accidental connection finally hitting him. This wasn't just about cultural awkwardness or diplomatic incidents anymore. Her life, her actual survival might depend on his ability to navigate alien traditions he barely understood. Then I guess I'd better win, he said with far more confidence. Then he felt the attendant cleared his throat. The challenge council awaits. As they followed the attendant toward the great hall, Kyle heard Kel's voice ring out across the garden. Prepare yourself, human. The ancestral trials will expose your unworthiness for all to witness. Kyle squeezed Rella's hand. Whatever this contest involved, he was suddenly certain of one thing: he wasn't ready to let her go. Not to Keeler, not to tradition, not to anything the indicator might have started this by accident. But what happened next would be his choice, and he chose her. The Great Hall of House Vexter all soared overhead, its living crystal dome capturing and amplifying the last rays of Zala's twin suns. Hundreds of Zari filled the tiered observation platforms, their combined whispers creating a sound like wind through alien leaves. Kyle stood at the center of it all, feeling remarkably underdressed for what appeared to be part courtroom drama, part gladiatorial spectacle. Kelter posed dramatically at the opposite side of the ceremonial circle, his ornate armor gleaming with inlaid precious metals, his head crest fully extended in dominance. Display added nearly a foot to his already impressive height. This challenge is unnecessary, Merchant Lord Vexer stated from his position among the presiding elders. The indicator has spoken, the indicator has been deceived. Kalera countered, his resonant voice carrying throughout the hall. No human could possibly be worthy of bonding with a Zari of Rella's lineage. I invoke the ancient right of challenge under the law of evolutionary preservation. An elderly Zari with elaborate facial markings rose from the center of the judging panel. The challenge is recognized. The contest of worthiness will proceed according to tradition. 3 trials to test mind, body, and spirit, the foundations of any lasting bond. Kyle leaned toward Risa, who stood beside him in formal attire that somehow managed to be both ceremonial and breathtaking. Any tips for the completely unprepared human? Just be yourself, she whispered back. That's what the indicator responded to. Great, be myself against an alien who's been training for this his entire life. No pressure, the elder continued as the challenge party mechanic. Kyle Mercer may select the order of trials. Kyle straightened. That was something. At least what exactly do these trials involve? The trial of mind, test knowledge and problem solving. The trial of body, test strength and coordination. The trial of spirit, tests. The elder paused, searching for the right words. What your kind might call character. Kyle considered his options. Physical combat against a Zari would be suicide. They were naturally stronger than humans' knowledge of Zari traditions, also suicide. That left. I'll start with the trial of mind, Kyle announced. The elder nodded sagely. A prudent choice. Prepare. The ancestral puzzle attendants brought forth what appeared to be a 3-dimensional maze constructed of interlocking crystal segments as they placed it on a pedestal. Between the competitors, Kyle noticed how the pieces shifted and realigned themselves constantly. The ancestral puzzle requires participants to guide energy from the outer nodes to the central core. The Elder explained traditionally competitors recite the sacred equations while solving a Keeler smirked I've mastered all 17 volumes of the sacred equations since childhood. Kyle studied the puzzle. It reminded him of the power distribution matrices he repaired on the Odyssey complex but governed by logical principles. Begin, the elder commanded. Kelk immediately launched into a sonorous recitation of what sounded like mathematical formulas in the Zari language. His fingers moved confidently over the puzzle surface, causing light to flow through various pathways. Kyle ignored the traditional approach entirely. Instead, he analyzed the energy flow patterns, noticing how they resembled the ship's power grid during surge compensation. He moved pieces according to principles of resistance and conductivity rather than the prescribed sequences. Gasps rippled through the audience as the human's unconventional approach caused energy to surge toward the core at unexpected speeds. That's not the proper sequence. Clark protested, his recitation faltering. You said guide the energy to the core, Kyle replied without looking up. You didn't specify how. The puzzle under Kyle's hands glowed brighter as energy converged at its center with a final twist of a crystal node. The entire structure pulsed with completed patterns. Nearly 2 minutes before Clark's methodical approach could finish. Impossible, Keeler sputtered. The elder studied the result with widened eyes. The trial of mind is complete. The human prevails through unorthodox methods. A murmur ran through the crowd. Risa caught Kyle's eye and gave him a subtle nod of approval that somehow meant more than the elder's formal declaration. The trial of body will commence, the elder announced. Physical prowess shall be tested through the grapple of ascension. Kyle's momentary satisfaction evaporated as attendance revealed an impossibly tall climbing structure embedded with moving obstacles at the peak. A small golden orb glimmered, reached the summit and claimed the orb of triumph. The elder instructed physical interference between competitors is permitted. Kyle assessed the structure. A straight strength competition against the Zari was suicide, but if he could use strategy instead. As the signal to begin sounded, Clark launched himself at the structure with impressive speed, scaling the lower sections effortlessly. Kyle took a different approach, studying the pattern of the moving obstacles before beginning his climb. The human hesitates. Someone called from the audience. He acknowledges his weakness. Kyle ignored the commentary, focusing on timing his ascent to exploit gaps in the obstacle patterns where Sealer powered through challenges with brute strength. Kyle slipped between them with calculated efficiency. Halfway up, Kelter realized the human was gaining. With a growl, he reached down to dislodge Kyle's handhold. Didn't see that coming, Kyle muttered, barely catching himself on an adjacent grip. Two could play that game. When Clark reached for a particular handhold, Kyle called out structural weakness at that joint. The Zari hesitated for a crucial second, just enough time for Kyle to slip past him. It wasn't strictly lie. The joint did look suspect from Kyle's engineering perspective, though it would likely hold deception. Kel snarled. Strategy, Kyle corrected, continuing his climb. The race to the top became a chess match of moves and counter moves. Kelk had superior strength and reach, but Kyle's calculated approach conserved energy and exploited efficient path. As they neared the summit, they were neck and neck with a final surge. Clark lunged for the golden orb but overextended. Kyle, anticipating this, waited for the Zari to commit before making his own perfectly timed grab. His fingers closed around the orb. A heartbeat before Keeler could reach it, the hall erupted in astonished exclamations. No one had expected the human to prevail in a physical challenge. The trial of body is complete, the elder announced, visibly surprised. The human prevails through tactical superiority. Kel's face contorted with rage as they descended. This proves nothing. The true test is the trial of spirit, where your alien nature will betray you. Kyle returned to Risa's side, breathing hard but feeling a growing confidence. Her golden eyes shone with something beyond approval now, pride perhaps, or even admiration. Not bad for a grease monkey, she whispered, her fingers briefly brushing his. The touch sent an electric current up his arm that had nothing to do with exertion. I'm just getting started, he replied, surprised by how much he meant it. The elder raised his hands for silence. The contest stands at 2 trials to none by ancient law. The third trial may be foregone if I demand the third trial. Kelter interrupted. The human must face the trial of spirit, the elder frowned at The interruption but nodded as is your right. Prepare the essence chamber. The center of the hall reconfigured itself, the floor spiraling open to reveal a circular chamber filled with softly glowing mist. Kyle felt a moment of trepidation. This trial seemed far less straightforward than the others. The trial of spirit reveals inner truth. The elder explained each contestant will enter the essence chamber separately. The ancestral myths will manifest your deepest motivations regarding this bond. These manifestations will be visible to all. Kyle swallowed hard. His deepest motivations. He'd been thrown into this situation by accident just days ago. What would the mists show? Clark entered first, standing proudly in the swirling vapor. The mist coalesced around him, forming images visible to the audience. Clark and resplendent regalia, Risa at his side, both presiding over vast trading operations. The vision expanded to show their offspring carrying on the legacy of two powerful houses united. I seek to honor tradition and strengthen our people through proper genetic alignment. Clark declared, my worthiness is evident in my devotion to Zari prosperity. The images were impressive. Even Kyle had to admit, very dynastic, very proper. The audience murmured appreciatively at the conventional perfection of it all. Tark emerged from the chamber with a triumphant smile. Let us see what alien desires motivate the human. Kyle stepped into the chamber with considerably less confidence. The mist swirled around him, cool against his skin, smelling faintly of ozone and something like cinnamon. What would it show? He barely knew what he wanted himself. The mist began to take shape, but not in the grand dynastic visions Kelk had displayed. Instead it showed Kyle and Risa simply talking in the garden, laughing together. It showed them working side by side on an engine component, her suggesting improvements, him implementing them. It showed them standing on the observation deck of a starship, looking out at new worlds neither had seen before. The audience fell silent, clearly not expecting these modest intimate scenes. But then the mist shifted again, showing something deeper. Kyle standing between Risa and those who would control her destiny, defending her right to choose. It showed him walking away from her, painful but willing. If that was truly her desire, it showed him valuing her happiness above tradition, politics, or his own wants. Kyle stood transfixed. The mist wasn't showing what he wanted from her, but what he wanted for her freedom, partnership, respect. I don't seek to possess her, Kyle said quietly, finding words for feelings he hadn't fully recognized until this moment. I want her to be free to choose her own path, even if that path doesn't include me. The mist swirled one final time, showing an image that made the audience gasp. Risa's indicator, glowing not as a symbol of captivity but as a beach leading toward possibilities neither Zari nor human had imagined before. As Kyle emerged from the chamber, the hall remained stunned into silence. Even the elders seemed at a loss for words. Risa stepped forward, breaking protocol. The indicator on her wrist pulsed with unprecedented brilliance as she faced the assembly. The trial of spirit has shown the truth, she declared. Kelter seeks to possess what I represent. Kyle Mercer seeks to protect who I am. She turned to face Kyle, her golden eyes filled with an emotion that transcended species barriers. The indicator chose correctly. The elder finally found his voice. The trial of spirit is complete. The contest of worthiness is decided. The bond stands, validated by ancient law. Clark roared in outrage, but his protests were drowned out by the assembly's reaction. Not universal approval, but a buzz of fascinated acceptance at witnessing something unprecedented. Later that night, after endless ceremonial affirmations and diplomatic exchanges, Kyle finally found himself alone with Risa in a secluded section of the family gardens. The bioluminescent plants seemed to respond to their presence, glowing more intensely as they walked together. So am I officially your alien husband now? Kyle asked, trying to process everything that had happened. Risa laughed, the sound like music in the quiet garden. The proper term is bond match, but yes, by all our traditions we are joined. She hesitated, then added, unless you wish to invoke the clause of coercion, claiming you were forced into this against your will. Would that hurt you? The bond-breaking thing you mentioned? She nodded, her expression growing serious. Yes, but I would survive it. Kyle stopped walking and turned to face her. Is that what you want? What I want? She gazed up at the twin moons Overhead their light casting iridescent patterns across her emerald features do. You know, no one has asked me that question in years. Seems like an important question in Zari society. Especially for daughters of prominent houses. What we want is secondary to what tradition and family require. She met his eyes directly. What I want is to see the stars up close, not just from the surface. Of Zel Kara, I want to explore technoles beyond our trading networks. I want to breathe air that hasn't been recycled through our atmospheric processors. Kyle felt his heart rate accelerate. You want to leave? I've wanted to leave since I was old enough to understand there was somewhere to go. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. The suffocating traditions, the endless political maneuvering, the expectation that I'll simply continue the family legacy without question. It's been like a gravitational well I couldn't escape. She reached out her emerald fingers, tracing the line of his jaw, and then you quite literally bumped into me, and my indicator lit up like a supernova. Kyle captured her hand in his. So the indicator didn't just sense biological compatibility, it recognized someone who might actually give you what you need. Freedom, she confirmed, moving closer, which is why what you showed in the trial of spirit affected me so deeply. You barely know me yet you instinctively understood what I truly need. The garden around them seemed to pulse in rhythm with Risa's indicator, creating a cocoon of shimmering light. Kyle found himself drawn toward her by something that felt simultaneously like gravity and like freedom. There's a problem though, he said, even as the distance between them diminished. I'm supposed to leave on the Odyssey in 24 hours. Risa's lips curved into a smile that made his pulse stutter. Perhaps that's not a problem at all. Perhaps it's an opportunity to do what. Take me with you, she whispered, her golden eyes reflecting the garden's luminescence. The indicator bond is recognized throughout Zari space. As your bond match, I have the legal right to accompany you. Kyle's mind raced. You'd leave everything, your family, your position, all of it, for the chance to see the universe beyond Zal Kara. Her expression grew momentarily vulnerable. Wouldn't you? Before Kyle could answer, his comm unit buzzed. He reluctantly checked the display. It's Captain Haroon again, probably wondering if I've caused another diplomatic incident. You should answer it, Risa said. Captains tend to get irritable when ignored. Kyle sighed and accepted the communication. Captain Haroon's face appeared, her expression tight with barely controlled emotion. Mechanic Mercer, I understand. Congratulations, or in order her tone suggested congratulations were the last thing on her mind. Thank you, Captain. It's been an unexpected development indeed. Haroon's dark eyes flipped to Risa, then back to Kyle. The Vex Terrell family has formally requested permission for Lady Risa to join our crew as a cultural tease in technical liaison. Given the unique circumstances, Fleet Command is inclined to approve. Kyle blinked in surprise. That's good news, right? That depends on your perspective, Haroon replied coldly. This is still a research vessel, not a honeymoon cruise. I expect absolute professionalism at all times. Her gaze hardened. We depart at 0800 tomorrow. Don't be late. The connection terminated abruptly. Your captain seems intense, Risa observed. That's putting it mildly. Kyle frowned at the comm unit. She's usually strict but fair. This felt personal. Perhaps it was, Risa said thoughtfully. Her biological responses showed classic signs of territorial aggression: increased capillary blood flow, pupil constriction, subtly altered vocal patterns. Wait, are you saying she's jealous? Risa shrugged elegantly. I'm merely noting observable physiological responses. Kyle shook his head in disbelief. That's impossible. Captain Haroon has never shown the slightest interest in me or any crew member. She's completely professional, if you say so. Risa's tone suggested she remained unconvinced. In any case, we should prepare for departure. I've already begun arrangements with my family. Just like that, they're letting you go. The bond is sacred even to my tradition-bound parents. Besides, she added with a mischievous smile, the potential trading opportunities of having their daughter aboard a human research vessel haven't escaped their notice. Kyle laughed. Always the merchants, always. Her expression softened. But there's something else we should discuss before tomorrow. What's that? She stepped closer, eliminating the remaining space between them. The indicator bond creates certain physiological expectations. Our bodies are becoming attuned to each other's biochemistry. Meaning, she said. Her voice dropping to a husky whisper. Prolonged physical separation can be uncomfortable for the Zari partner. Kyle swallowed hard. We wouldn't want that, no. She agreed, her emerald fingers sliding up his chest. We wooed, and the bioluminescent plants around them intensified their glow as Risa leaned in, her golden eyes drifting closed. Their lips met, alien yet somehow perfectly familiar, and Kyle felt the indicators. Warmth pulse between them like a shared heartbeat. What began as exploratory quickly deepened into something neither could deny, despite the absurdity of their situation, or perhaps because of it. The connection between them felt more real than anything Kyle had experienced before. We should go somewhere more private, he murmured against her lips. My quarters, she replied, taking his hand. The eastern wing is practically deserted at this hour. Dawn broke over Zira's horizon, filtering through the crystalline architecture of Risa's chambers. Kyle woke to the unfamiliar sensation of emerald fingers tracing patterns on his chest. Good morning, bond match, Risa said, her golden eyes regarding him with a combination of affection and amusement. Morning, Kyle replied, memories of the night flooding back. So that's what the indicator means by compatibility, she laughed, the sound like music in the quiet room. That's merely one aspect, but an important one, wouldn't you agree? Definitely no complaints in that department, he confirmed, pulling her closer. The indicator on her wrist pulsed contentedly between them. And any regrets about last night? Only that we didn't have more time. She rested her head against his shoulder. Though I suppose we'll have plenty aboard your ship. Kyle checked the time display. We need to be at the docking port in 2 hours. Plenty of time, she murmured, her fingers continuing their exploration for what her golden eyes sparkled with mischief. Further compatibility testing. The Odyssey's loading bay bustled with activity as crew members completed final preparations for departure. Kyle stood beside Risa, watching as her considerable luggage was catalogued and stowed by wide-eyed crew members who couldn't quite hide their fascination with the exotic Zari. Female Captain Haroon approached, her uniform impeccable as always. Lady Vex Toral, welcome aboard the Odyssey. Her tone was professionally cordial, but Kyle noticed the tightness around her eyes. Thank you, Captain. Arlisa replied with perfect diplomatic grace. I look forward to contributing to your mission. I've assigned you quarters in the diplomatic section. Haroon continued. Mechanic Mercer will of course remain in standard crew quarters as befitting his position. Kyle blinked in surprise. Captain, given the circumstances of our bond, the circumstances of your bond are your personal affair. Haroon interrupted sharply. This is still a Federation research vessel operating under military protocols. We don't alter crew assignments for personal relationships. Her gaze hardened. Is that understood? Mechanic. Before Kyle could protest, Risa placed a gentle hand on his arm. Perfectly understood, Captain. We appreciate your accommodation of this unexpected situation. Haroon nodded stiffly. Report to engineering at 0900. Mercer, we have thruster calibrations pending. With that she turned and strode away. Okay, maybe you were right about the jealousy thing, Kyle muttered once Haroon was out of earshot. Lisa's lips curved into a knowing smile. Don't worry about separate quarters. No, the indicator bond creates certain navigational abilities. I'll always be able to find you no matter where you are on the ship. Her golden eyes sparkled with promise. And Captain Haroon can't possibly monitor all maintenance access corridors at all times. Kyle laughed, feeling a surge of excitement at what lay ahead. 2 days ago he'd been a simple mechanic on a routine mission. Now he was bond matched to the most fascinating woman he'd ever met, about to explore the stars with her at his side. The indicator may have activated by accident, but what had grown between them since was entirely their choice. As the Odyssey's engines rumbled to life, preparing to carry them beyond Zira's gravity, well, Kyle realized that some accidents were really just the universe's way of giving you exactly what you needed before you knew to ask for it, and he wouldn't trade this particular accident for anything in the cosmos.